All right. Hey, welcome. This is the Facebook Live Advanced Hypnosis Skills Facebook group. And as I try to do seriously every Saturday around this time, I try very much to, here we go, to do a live question and answer. So if you do have some questions, and I'm also going to borrow some questions that have been posted on the Facebook group today. Those of you who are here for the first time or watching maybe on the YouTube, as this is converted to YouTube, I'm David Barron. I've been doing hypnosis for nearly 20 years. Figure I've done maybe 10,000 clients. At least what I say is I've quit counting or caring after I reach 10,000 clients. And typically what I do is help people stop smoking, weight loss, habit control, anxiety, phobias, things like that. Most of the stuff that you, I hope, would generally associate with hypnosis. Interestingly, in fact, if some of you, some other people here want to ask about the other associations of hypnosis, like regression and some of the more new agey type stuff, I would be happy to address that. But today, I just want to follow up with some questions that have appeared on the Facebook page. So where I want to start, Zach Honda. Hello, Zach. I want to give you a shout out for posting your question. It is sincerely a really good question. Has studying hypnosis made you more self-aware in any novel ways? Self-aware would mean more aware of myself. What I have become aware of, and I guess it has to do with being aware of myself, but I've become aware of my attention, the things I pay attention to. What that means to me is that when I'm with somebody, I have an outcome in mind, and every bit of my attention is focused on them and getting the goals for them, that they want. So I have noticed how, also as far as self-awareness goes, how much my thoughts affect my moods. And I'm not trying to be particularly new agey or, thoughts or things or law of attraction type stuff here. But yeah, I notice that if I get fixated on something that is angering, I tend to get more angry. And so over time, I have noticed to be aware of that sooner, faster, and to navigate around it, to change my patterns, to do something different. When I talk about working with other people and how I've become more aware with that, I guess I have to preface it. Keep in mind, I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. So a lot of the stuff I can do very directly through hypnosis, but sometimes I don't even do hypnosis with people. I had a client here recently. She quit smoking through hypnosis. She had a series of traumas and she started smoking again. And she came to the point where, and then, okay, this is a lady who is COPD, cardiopulmonary obstructive disorder. So she was on oxygen and she definitely needs to quit smoking. She came back the last time, most recently. She did not even like to smoke, and what would happen is she would start thinking about smoking, then feel guilty about thinking about smoking, and then have a cigarette. Now, her smoking was not driven by cravings, but by just mental impulses. And what I had decided is, well, I didn't so much decide it as it just evolved from the conversation. Normally, I would do a hypnosis, but what I did instead was just do conversational work with her. And I began to ask her first to take the guilt out of it. I mean, it was the guilt that actually caused her. She felt so bad, so guilty, about it that it caused her to just surrender to the smoking, which of course made her feel guiltier and created a really uncomfortable loop of behaviors and emotions. I started to separate that from it, to look at smoking without any sort of guilt. I started to bring in things like humor, and I did some very direct sort of spatial anchoring. And ultimately, I managed, instead of her feeling guilty about thinking about smoking, she started to laugh about smoking. And through that whole conversation, once I got that happen once, I then decided, I then distracted her, talked about something else, then we brought it back again and started laughing, and distracted her again in other conversations, then brought it back again, and she started laughing about smoking. And at that particular point, we did it enough times, it just became a habit for her, that the whole idea of having a cigarette, she would see a dancing cigarette in front of her head, in front of her mind, and just think it's ridiculous. And of course, she wouldn't have any desire for smoking. And this was all done conversationally. The whole study of hypnosis, the whole study of working with human beings and helping them make change, has made me more aware, not necessarily self-aware, but made me aware of people's attention and their responses to what they think. And in that case, it has made me much more aware of the things that I do as well. So Zach, it is a good question. If you do study hypnosis, if you do work with people a lot, even if you're not a hypnotist and you just try and influence and persuade them, you're going to become very aware of a lot of patterns. And again, I want to preface it. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been doing this for a buttload of time. So it's come with experience, and you can learn it very quickly. I have no doubt about that. So a lot of this is just pretty deeply ingrained in me. But nonetheless, practice, apply, do the super best that you can. All right, let's see. So if you have any questions, go ahead and just post them. It's okay if you don't, that's fine too. Let's see. All right, yeah, I wanted to post something, I mentioned something. I started to work on a document. It's actually going to be an addition sometime soon to my book, Building Your Cult. If you have watched or if you have are familiar with my book, Building Your Cult, let me see if I'll post it here for you. I recently added a portion to it. It's just about Charles Manson and how he basically effed people up to obediently follow him, and how he built a cult. Now, that was inspired through a conversation with Chase Hughes. I will give him complete and full credit for that. What I got me thinking is, there are other organizations, there are other people who influence things deeply, and I began to think, well, okay, what if I just started to take a look at Scientology? They are pretty nefarious. Okay, Miko, you have a great question. I will address that when I talk here, after I talk here. And so I just started to analyze everything that I knew about Scientology and how it affects people and influences people. And I managed to distill down 10 things that I think make it a very powerful and compelling organization that creates such a profound following, which some people will say is cult-like. Now, those of you who are not familiar with Scientology, just do a little research on the internet. You will find that it is a movement unlike any other in which followers of this willingly are convinced to give up their money and their time to support the Scientology cause, and is well documented from its former members of leaving virtually nothing in their bank accounts. Former members who leave the organization are shunned and disinherited from family members and siblings and children who remain in the organization. To make a terrible situation worse, they are even subject to harassment and lawsuits if they speak out about their experience. Now, this is a starting point, and it's hard to imagine how someone would willingly get involved in Scientology. But let's sort of back up. No one, not a single human being, decides to get involved in a cult. No one decided that they needed to follow Charles Manson. No one decided to get involved in the cult. They start off with something entirely different. So what I was able to do is I sort of went through everything I knew about Scientology, and then decided to just sort of itemize the 10 things that I came across. The very first thing is they promise solutions to a multitude of very common problems. So, are you stressed? I have a solution for that. Do you want to communicate better? I have a solution to that. Do you find yourself feeling anxious? No, there's a solution for that too. So as long as through all of this, they are presenting a solution to some very common problems. They also, that's the first one. The second step, or the second way, I'll just call it a way, the second method they use to create a cult-like following is credibility through celebrity. Back in the 50s and 60s, right when Scientology was being built, its founder, Lafayette Ron Hubbard, really recognized the power of having celebrities as part of the cause. And he managed to get some very important and famous people involved in it, and he started to exploit that. The organization, it is now part of the culture of Scientology, that if you have rich, famous, and successful people who are in the organization, they become the figurehead for the organization. So you have actors like John Travolta and like Tom Cruise. So they actually have a pretty well documented strategy of trying to reach out to people, to actors who are credible, famous, believable, and rich. And if they can reel them in, they treat them incredibly well, and they start sort of building up, grooming them to be spokespeople for the organization. So that's number two, credibility through celebrity. The method number three that they use is what's called easy first involvement. And that's just a very simple way of getting people. It's just a hook. It's just a hook to get people involved. And it is, for Scientology, the survey. They call it a personality survey. I think they call it the Stanford Personality Survey, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the University of Stanford. And it's just asks a series of detailed questions that they can then go back and say, hey, okay, you've got this problem, we can help with that. Got this problem, we can help with that. But if you go online and you look at their Stanford personality survey, it doesn't matter who answers it, there's going to be a problem they can solve that's phrased in such a way that they can start addressing it. And it gets that very first involvement. It gets that very first person involved with each of the steps. Let's see, let's go on a little further here. Okay. Number three. No, that is number three. The fourth method is they offer a broadly appealing communication course. They start with a survey. They say that many of the things that our problems for you can be solved by just taking our simple communication course. And it's a really low-hanging fruit. It's a very simple, easy way to get involved. I think they charge maybe $30 or $45 or something like that. And it's I think it's an afternoon. I don't know how many days or hours it takes, but it is a progression of exercises that they do. And it's designed, what they say, to make you a better communicator. Well, I mean, if you're an actor, or if you're in Hollywood, or if I knew quite a few people who are immigrants learning English for the first time, and they take this communication course to get reeled in. And so it starts off. Now, the devious thing about this communication course is what it does. First of all, every step as you are on the what they call it, the bridge to freedom, I think they call it, in Scientology, every step that you continue to progress, you are given rewards, and those simple rewards in terms of acknowledgement. You're told how well you are doing. You're saying you're doing this great, you're going to be great. Your anticipation is given all of the time. So you feel good about the progress you're making, and you know you're not done. There's still more ahead. This goes on even beyond the communication course with their indoctrinated wisdom, which they call the OT levels. And each level is another skill set, a mental, emotional, spiritual skill set in which you gain more wisdom, power. Of course, each level costs more and more and more and more. And they ask you very sincerely to continue with your training for the greater good. The sixth method that they use is an entrainment process. Entrainment is a method, a term that came about, I forget the scientist who did it, but he was a clockmaker, and he noticed that a series of pendulum clocks in the same room over time start to synchronize with each other. Just the vibrations through the wood, through the air, through the structure of the building causes the pendulums to start swinging in the same rhythm. Entrainment is a way of getting someone to follow instructions, to be absolutely in step and in link with the other person. And these are done in the communication course called the TRs, the training routines. They go in a progression, but the ultimate progression, one of the ultimate progressions, is where you have the person you're working with, who is the auditor, give you an instruction. They say, stand up, and you're supposed to stand up. And they give you one instruction after another that you follow. And they do it enough and enough and more that there is no hesitation between what they say and what you do. You become completely entrained, in sync with what they're telling you. And then you switch and you do it with them. Now, what this does is it trains the person involved to follow whatever command is given. It makes it so that they will follow the command as it is given. Much more thorough, much more devious than you might imagine. And, because you're given the reward and you're involved with people and they're praising you, it actually feels good. Now, entrainment is something that I use to a degree in hypnosis, in my hypnosis practice. But of course, I'm pretty straightforward with it. It's just designed to help people follow my instructions more easily. And I don't at the end tell them, okay, sign up for the next course, which is what Scientology does. Okay, number 7 in the methods that Scientology used to create a cult-like following. They create a dramatic first result. They have a process which they call auditing, which for a lot of people, is highly emotional. It's incredibly liberating. It feels incredibly good. And it removes emotional barriers that were there from past experiences. So they always go for a dramatic first result. Now, this works with hypnosis too. I can get a very dramatic first result with hypnosis. And if I had the same quality of ethics as Scientology does, I could have the person continue to come back more and more and more and more and more, emptying their bank accounts to continue their training just based on that very dramatic first result. That is not how I do it, however. They come for me for a reason, for an end result, and I give it to them. So creating a dramatic first result. Method number 8 is they have what I call as a grand vision. And if you read my book, the latest version of Building Your Cults, I talk about the importance of having a grand vision, something that is bigger than you, something that you can feel involved in. And they describe their grand vision quite explicitly as being able to clear the world, which is to remove all mental and emotional obstacles from everyone in the world and make the world a better place. So once you are aware of this grand vision, once you understand what it means and the obligation you have and how important it is to clear the world, they start to enlist you more and more and more. And the only way that you can clear the world is to continue to clear yourself, to take the OT courses and give them more money. Number 9 in the methods used to create a cult-like following is they offer a very structured, I call it indoctrinated wisdom, or it basically means that you have to go from one level of learning something to another level, and each level is more than the next. Initiated wisdom. You have to be initiated into the understanding of one thing, and just even what's called OT3. That's the third level. It takes like $100,000 to just enter into OT3. But you have been prepared so much through that process that when you find out what it is, it doesn't sound ridiculous. And what OT3 is going to tell you is that you have little spirits, entity beings that are called thetans that are attached and clinging to your body, and they are the ones that have the problems on them. And you are to treat them and remove them one by one by one. And you do that by going through the auditing process. Well, you tell someone like that who has not gone through this initiated wisdom, it'll be freaking ridiculous. But since you've gone through this initiated wisdom and you've reached this point and you've already invested so much to get this training, you treat it seriously. And it's just a continued process of consistency that happens over time. You act one way and you continue to act this way. And it's one of the reasons why people are so very much entrenched in the whole process of Scientology. They demand a very consistent response, and they have really structured the whole Scientology culture to have very strong, consistent results and structures. Okay, the number 10 is they have a really strong culture that speaks only in directives. And what I mean by that is that there was a document that was released back when Anonymous sort of got all the Scientology documents. And it made it very clear, and this was a document that I think was written by L. Ron Hubbard, who talks about how people's want, their desire, is very, very weak. So you cannot give them any opportunity to weaken that any further. And how you do that is you don't ask questions that allow them to reflect on their want. Instead, you just tell them what to do. Come over here. Great. Have a seat. We're going to talk to you about the auditing process. And then they talk about it. And just by giving directives, they're speaking to people. Come here, sign this, sit down, grab the e-meter. They train you to respond to their orders. So they speak only in terms of directives. Now, I sort of culminated this to an 11th method, which is everything, all of this put together, demands a complete absorption in the indoctrination. If you have followed some of the videos on YouTube, interviews with Leah Remini, the actress, and her departure from Scientology, she will tell you that when she was deep into it and she was a working actress, that every day after she worked, she would go to the Scientology organization and go through a series of trainings. And it really was demanding. It demanded her study, her attention. It became the only thing she would think about. It would be the people she was around. And all of this conforms to what Stephen Hassan, the author of Combating Cult Mind Control, calls the BITE model, B-I-T-E, which demands conformity to behaviors, which means you're only supposed to act a certain way. Conformity to information, which is you should only be reading certain information. Again, that describes what Leah Remini went through. Behaviors toward thoughts, which you should only be thinking the certain right thoughts. You should be completely absorbed in the right thoughts. And lastly, conformity to emotions. There are only so many feelings you're supposed to have if you are the person who is truly a really clear Scientologist. And all of this comes together to really create someone who is deeply involved in the Scientology organization. And now I would like to sort of preface all this. If you do have any questions, please throw them at me. I do want to say that I am not here to personally offend anyone who is in Scientology. I would love to talk with you, actually. So if you want to talk with me, and I mean not argue, I mean I would just love to talk. I'd love to find out more. Please let me know. Now, if you have any questions about this, I'm happy to continue. Ron, thank you for the comment. I'm glad to keep giving good content here. Now let's see, there was a question. Let's see. Oh yes, Miko, you're always great at giving great questions here. What's the best source of conversational belief changes? Wow. I am not sure I have a conversational belief changes. I think this is coming from some recent studies and understandings of just talking with people. If you're in the United States right now and you are aware of the political situation, it is very separated, disparate. It is very confrontive. It is very argumentative. And to get a conversation between two opposing political views, anti-fascia and alt-right, is nearly impossible without some very serious confrontation. So the process to best do that is to start by not being defensive. If you want to engage someone with the intent of helping them change their belief, ask them with intense curiosity, with sincere interest, and with an understanding that this is a person who wants to be taken seriously. Start engaging them in conversations about that belief. Ask them what it means to them, have they considered certain things, and then once they feel as though you're interested, you can ask what could be designed as confrontive questions, but your tonality has to be tempered with really sincere curiosity. A great example of that is, let's take, okay, here's it. If you were to talk to a true Trump supporter and ask this question, you could very easily ask it in a really confrontive way, which would cause them to be defensive. And the question would be something like, do you want a president who, has a history of misogyny, of hating women, of using them, of belittling them, of hiring prostitutes? Okay, so that is asked in a very confrontive way. You could basically try and get the same information by being very curious and very non-defensive in your question, by simply asking, what are your thoughts about the president's, what people call as the president's history with women? What do you think about that? Now, you're essentially asking the same question, but you're asking it in much more of an elicitation process as opposed to a confronting process. Now, this is typical belief change stuff that, so-called cult deprogrammers go through. They just want the person to step back and think about their belief, to conversationally talk about their belief as if it were a thing as opposed to a part of who they are. That's one of the very first starts in making any sort of conversational belief change. And you gotta be patient. People do not want their beliefs changed because their beliefs make up part of their identity, it makes up part of their whole reality. So to have them change a belief, it has to be done so they're feeling as though they're changing it on their own. And that can only be done by not giving them the answers, but having them consider the really serious questions. That's the best way of doing it. I hope that answers your question about conversational belief change. You really have to be supportive of the individual. You really have to be nurturing of them. You really have to let them feel as though you value their well-being when you're asking these questions. So you may value their well-being, but you may ask a really stupid question and get very confrontational about it. So just be aware of it. Okay. Any other questions here? I see none. Let me sort of take a look here, see if we can go through any other questions that have been here. Zach asked about nootropics enhancing. Those are the drugs that are designed to enhance cognitive and mental skills. I have some experience with that, not a lot. And keep in mind, I'm not recommending you do them. My personal experience has to do with modafinil, which is anti-narcolepsy medicine. And my personal experience indicates that it creates a certain enhanced state of alertness. Some people say it's very dramatic. It can be dramatic initially, but after a while, it's relatively hard to notice. It is not an addictive sort of drug in any way. But the thing I want to preface, if anyone's looking into nootropic drugs, is just be keenly aware of the placebo effect. I mean, you could be given a sugar pill and think it's the next mind-enhancing drug that's out there, and feel as though you're really alert, really sharp, and getting things done in a very quick way, and cognitively processing the world very sublimely. But it could be the placebo effect. There are some studies that are being done with gamers, so with professional gaming athletes. These are the people who play video games professionally at a high competitive level, using these drugs to sort of just follow along. So there are some studies with that to see if it enhances their ability. But I would say, just first of all, be cautious, do your reading, and that's the best I could tell you. Anything else? Okay. Yeah, I want to mention this upcoming Monday, that's day after tomorrow, All Business Media FM is going to be interviewing me for at least 10 minutes or so. And if you go to the Advanced Hypnosis Skills group, you'll have the information on how to do that. I will make an attempt to post the interview here, and hopefully, you can like and share and things like that. If you guys have any questions, please post them. I will try and address them next week. And again, I want to thank you guys for taking part, because you are here, you are not somewhere else, and that's a sacrifice on your part. I want to thank you very much for making that sacrifice. So please take care. Talk to you next week. Bye.